Let's go!
You're listening to the Cage Nation TV Prizefight Podcast. Coming to you from the Candid Cameron Studios in State College, Pennsylvania. Here's your host, Albert Cameron.
My name is Albert Cameron, and I did not win the Powerball this week. Thank you for joining us for this week's Prizefight Podcast. I'm your host, Albert Cameron. Today is Friday, and Friday means Podcast Day. Friday also means the Friday 5 at CageNationDB.com, where this week we showcase Dan the Bionic Fist of Justice, Kakuta, and his 5 fastest finishes. If I you to say that 5 times fast. It's on over right now at CageNationDB.com. Check it out. Every week we are putting out the Prizefight Podcast and the Friday 5. If you have suggestions for the Friday 5, be sure to let us know at CageNationDB.com on Twitter, YouTube, or shoot us an email at CageNationTV.com. Today on the Prizefight Podcast, CM Punk, former WWE heavyweight champion, going to be known in the fighting world as Phil Brooks, is in direct danger of possibly having competition for his first UFC fight. We got the nuts and bolts of all that going on, but before we get into that, I'd like to take a moment and express my disbelief, shock, displeasure that Frankie Edgar is not getting his shot against Conor McGregor right away. Conor McGregor is going to be fighting Rafael dos Anjos for the UFC lightweight championship in a bout that was it could have used a little bit more tact. Conor McGregor was said to be holding out for more money, more compensation, whatever the case may be, but that fight was signed. Conor McGregor has an opportunity to be the first fighter in UFC history to hold dual titles, the UFC lightweight championship and his own UFC featherweight championship. Also on that card will be Holly Holm, and she will be taking on Miesha Cupcake Tate. She's not going to have to wait for Ronda Rousey to get done with filming her movies. Those fights are set. I'm really disappointed for Frankie Edgar. I thought he had proven himself by now by beating Chad Mendes, but the UFC doesn't pay me to be a decision maker. They really don't pay me at all. I am very thankful to UFC for putting on regular fights and fights that are worth talking about, whether or not I agree with them being promoted at the time they are or not. Have you guys ever seen the movie Over the Top? It's the arm wrestling movie where Sylvester Stallone is going to Vegas. He's going to compete in the arm wrestling competition, and whenever he's getting really, really serious, he turns his hat backwards. Ladies and gentlemen, Albert Cameron is turning his hat backwards. This is really... I've done the homework on this one. I've done the homework on Phil Brooks possibly getting a UFC opponent. The opponent has been indicated, but he hasn't been named yet because all the contingencies have not been met yet. On Dana White's I'm Looking for a Fight series, Mickey Gall, a pro fighter out of the New Jersey area, said, "Dana White, I want to fight CM Punk." Of course, Mickey Gall's not the first fighter to say that. The former Green Ranger, martial artist, black belt in traditional karate, Jason David Frank, who does have 4 professional MMA fights, has also said, "Hey, I want to fight CM Punk. I was the Green Ranger." As a child who grew up in the 90s, I kind of geeked out a lot. There was a lot of geeking out. Mickey Gall said, "Dana White, I want to fight CM Punk." Dana White, not one to give away all of his negotiation leverage right out of the bat, said, "Okay, I'll give you a shot, but you got to go through another fighter first." That fighter is a fighter by the name of Michael Jackson, and I am not talking about the resurrected king of pop. I'm talking about a fighter with 2 wins, 3 losses, his wins coming by way of decision and technical knockout. Now, who is Mickey Gall? Well, Mickey Gall is a guy with 1 pro fight. He has a rear naked choke victory over Ron Templeton at the Dead Serious MMA event. Mickey Gall is also undefeated as an amateur. He's fighting out of the New Jersey area, and he's a fighter for the Miller Brothers MMA camp. And that's pretty much all I know. The UFC makes good fights. That's what they do. That's why they're number 1. That's why they are on top. When they signed Phil Brooks, they signed him knowing that he carried a tremendous fan base from his days as WWE champion, and that's just smart business. The guy already has a following. He already has a fan base. They don't have to do much work to promote him because all the promotion has done itself. Phil Brooks is even in the new EA Sports UFC game, which was met with a healthy mix of approval and outcry. How can a guy be featured in a UFC game with a ranking the way he has if he's never fought? Phil Brooks, who's training out of Rufus Sport right now, has no amateur fights. He has no pro fights. When he walks into the octagon, potentially against Mickey Gall, he's walking in as a debuting fighter with 0, less than 1 fights under his belt. UFC traditionally doesn't do debuting fighters. Brock Lesnar had a fight in Japan before he fought. Dave Bautista fought for CES MMA against Vince Lombardi. No amateur fights, but still, UFC really does not do debuting fighters, and they haven't since the early days. Not since everyone's become a mixed martial arts fighter. Not since you have to train in everything. You have to train in boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai. The days of fighters being really good at one thing are really over, and they have been for the past several years, if not the past decade. Now, it's been gone on record to say that if Mickey Gall wins, he's going to get the first shot at CM Punk at Phil Brooks. If Michael Jackson wins, Michael Jackson does not get the shot at CM Punk at Phil Brooks. Now, what do we know about Phil Brooks, about the former WWE heavyweight champion. Well, we know that being a former WWE heavyweight champion means absolutely nothing in the world of UFC and mixed martial arts. Professional wrestling is very physically demanding, but it is predetermined. In the world of mixed martial arts, if anyone's even suspected of fixing a fight, well, then there is all kinds of hell to pay by way of the athletic commission. State athletic commissions will come down on guys for every little thing. I personally have seen fights canceled, maybe a fight canceled, because the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission did not believe a fighter submitted credentials. The Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission has an obligation, a duty, to protect fighter safety, and that fighter, they felt his credentials were not adequate enough for him to fight, that he may have made them up, so he didn't fight. That was the end of it. I highly doubt that fighter will ever fight again. So, being a WWE heavyweight champion, as much prestige and public notoriety comes with it, being a former WWE heavyweight champion really doesn't mean much in the world of prize fighting in mixed martial arts. Now, Phil Brooks, a natural athlete, we got to give him that. He's a natural athlete. Has been fighting with Rufus Sport. Rufus Sport is the brainchild of former K1 kickboxer Duke Rufus. Duke Rufus has been training a lot of dangerous human beings. Duke Rufus himself, a kickboxer, former commentator for K1. Right now, Phil Brooks is training with some pretty heavy-handed, some pretty high-profile teammates. Among those teammates are Anthony Showtime Pettis, former UFC champion, his brother, Sergio the Phenom Pettis, Alan Belcher, Funky Ben Askren, who is right now a champion over in Asia. Those names are the kind of guys you want to be training with. Randy Couture himself said, iron sharpens iron. If you're training with championship caliber fighters, with teammates like that, chances are you are doing things right. You are heading in the right direction. Now, both Gall and Jackson have fought in the middleweight division, but they're lighter middleweights. They could easily cut to welterweight. It's been a lot of speculation. Where is CM Punk going to fight at? Where is Phil Brooks going to find himself landing as far as weight classes go? It's been speculated that he could fight middleweight, but he would be kind of small for middleweight. He'd also have to make a little bit of a drastic cut. Now, Phil Brooks has a body type where he's really between middleweight and welterweight. That both weight classes would have their advantages and their disadvantages. If Phil Brooks fought at middleweight, the weight cut wouldn't be as severe, but he'd also be fighting much larger competition. If he fought at welterweight, he'd be a bigger welterweight, but the weight cut may take its toll on him, may suck some kind of the energy, maybe sap kind of his strength out of the fight. So, right now it's still up in the air. From the beginning of Phil Brooks being signed to the UFC, it's been speculated. Where is he going to fight? Is he going to fight at middleweight, at welterweight? Well, with the announcement of his potential opponents, we still don't know. It could go either way. Now, just for scale, just so we have an idea of what Phil Brooks' body type is capable of. When he was competing with the World Wrestling Entertainment Organization, there was at one point that he was as heavy as 220, I believe. He was as heavy as 220 because he thought that that's the kind of body type that the WWE was going for the heavier body types. So he was putting on muscle mass, and he was still in peak performing condition. He was still able to get in there and do what he needed to do, but he leaned up. That wasn't him. He's never competed at anyone else's standards except for his own. So middleweight, welterweight, both really not out of the question. Now, we do need to keep in mind that, yes, WWE fans, we are all excited. Phil Brooks, CM Punk is coming to the UFC. He has endearing thoughts and endearing anecdotes for all you all. But we need to keep in mind that Phil Brooks is coming into this fight with a debut. He has none octagon experiences. We have no idea how he's going to relate. Now, he has been representing MMA in his facets in his predetermined competition. He'd be on weekly television wearing the Gracie Barra sweatshirt, training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He picked a really good camp with Rufus Sport with some high-profile training partners. But we do need to keep in mind that he is debuting. He has no cage experience. The Mickey Gall, Michael Jackson really aren't high-profile tests for him either. They're all very similar in experience, so it could come down to, training, about the intangibles. Has their training been sufficient? Have they been preparing? Are they all mentally tough for being on the main stage? Are they ready for the bright lights, the pay-per-view action? I mean, it could even be on Fight Pass. With him being a debuting professional fighter, has he earned pay-per-view exposure yet? The UFC has some fantastic outlets, Fight Pass, UFC on Fox, all those things are ready outlets for Phil Brooks to fight on. Me personally, I don't know yet. I have no way to prognosticate how I think he's going to do. His training partners, his training camp, not quite a super gym in my opinion. When I think of super gym, I think of the Lion's Den, I think of Militich Fighting Systems, but Rufus Sport is pretty legit. So with all that being said, Phil Brooks, the former WWE heavyweight champion, the cult of personality, CM Punk, is a lot closer than he was a year ago to having his debut. And hopefully he surprises us, and hopefully he does what Brock Lesnar did. Capture a title, silence the haters, and make his debut as successful as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my time. It's been the Prizefight Podcast. Again, if you are a musician, this is the part where your music will carry the episode out. Shoot us an email at cagenationtv@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, send us a message. Let's get your music heard. For all of you guys for joining us today, thank you very much. I'm Albert Cameron, and this has been the Prizefight Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Cage Nation Prizefight Podcast. All rights reserved, 2015-2016 Planetary Sports. The Prizefight Podcast is part of the Cage Nation Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.cagenationtv.com.